Welcome to this presentation by the State Association of Fire and Emergency Districts, or SAFE-D. In this presentation, we will discuss what an emergency services district is, how ESDs provide reliable funding for emergency services, and the steps to create an emergency services district in a Texas community. An emergency services district is a local government, much like a city, municipal utility district, or even a school district. It is not part of the county government, although most ESDs work closely with their county officials. Voters may create an ESD to provide fire protection, EMS, or other emergency services. An ESD is created by the voters to provide those emergency services in their community. An ESD is responsible to the voters, and the ESD Board of Commissioners becomes stewards of taxpayer money and assets. An ESD does not have bylaws as such. It operates under Chapter 775 of the Texas Health and Safety Code. When an ESD has a legal question about what it can and can't do, the first place to look is Chapter 775. The 5-member Board of Commissioners, in most cases appointed by the County Commissioners Court, is responsible for the operation of the Emergency Services District. That means making sure the ESD complies with the laws, such as Chapter 775. It is up to the Board of Commissioners to determine how to provide the services that the voters expect. The ESD board, if it has sufficient revenue, could hire its own staff and buy its own equipment and stations. The commissioners may contract with another entity for services. That could be a municipality or another ESD. It could be a volunteer group, such as a volunteer fire department or an EMS organization. It could even be a for-profit organization, such as a for-profit ambulance service. The decision is up to the ESD board. That's who the voters have trusted to provide their emergency services. There are roughly 342 emergency services districts in 94 Texas counties, and about 250 of those are members of SAFE-D. At virtually every uniform election day, new ESDs are created. There may be specific local reasons the drive to create an ESD began, but the recurring theme for creation is the need to ensure reliable funding for emergency services in a community, whether that's in a rural county or an urban suburb. ESDs trace their lineage to old rural fire prevention districts. Voters approved a constitutional amendment allowing for RFPDs in the late 1940s. When many rural volunteer fire departments were struggling to pay for equipment. They needed more than a few yards of garden hose and an old pickup truck. There's a story of one fire chief whose fire department relied on an annual barbecue for its operating funds. One year, a torrential rainstorm wiped out the fire festivities, and the volunteer fire department only made $87. That's when the chief knew he needed help to create a taxing district. With reliable tax revenues, RFPDs were able to ensure support from all the people who might benefit from their protection. The RFPD's maximum tax rate of 3 cents per $100 of assessed property value soon was eaten away by inflation. And in the late 1980s, the legislature created a new type of district, the Emergency Services District. In 2003, the legislature determined that ESDs were the preferred way of providing emergency services in suburbs and rural areas. It converted all the old RFPDs to emergency services districts. That was timely, as the costs of operating fire department and emergency medical services were climbing rapidly. A well-outfitted engine could cost $500,000 or more. A fire or EMS station could run in the millions of dollars. With aging baby boomers and increased commute times in urban sprawls, the availability of volunteers has been diminished. More ESDs are hiring career firefighters or EMTs to make sure someone's there when the 911 call comes in. ESDs can levy a property tax, but the tax rate cannot exceed 10 cents per $100 of property value. That's in the Texas Constitution. And that tax rate has to cover operating expenses and big ticket capital expenses, like fire engines, ambulances, and stations. Other Texas governments have higher caps and can set a separate tax rate for capital expenditures. About a third of the ESDs in the state are hitting their head on that constitutional maximum. In contrast, municipalities routinely expend twice the taxing effort of ESDs. ESDs are a bargain. The owner of a home on the tax rolls for $300,000 will pay at the maximum $300 a year to know that trained, properly equipped firefighters and EMTs will be at the door within minutes if there's an emergency. ESDs can also collect sales tax with voter approval. The maximum sales tax that can be collected in Texas is 8.25% on taxable purchases. 6.25% goes to the state of Texas. The remaining 2% is available to local jurisdictions, such as ESDs, usually on a first-come, first-served basis. In most jurisdictions, if any portion is at the 8.25% maximum, the jurisdiction is barred from collecting sales tax. But because the legislature recognizes the importance of public safety, ESDs can carve out areas at the maximum and still receive sales tax revenues. Let's look at an example. In this example, the ESD is in the orange area. Since they're in Texas, all businesses in the ESD are collecting the 6.25% sales tax on taxable purchases. That goes straight to the state. The ESD includes a city, here in black, that's already at the maximum permissible sales tax rate, collecting the state's 6.25% and 2% for its city operations. Prior to 2007 legislation, that would mean that the ESD could not collect a sales tax. Another city in gray is only collecting 7.25%, the state's 6.25%, and 1% collected for the city. The law changed in 2007 and again in 2017. Now, in one election, voters can give the ESD authority to collect a sales tax in an area where the sales tax rate is not at the maximum, 2% in the orange area, 1% in the gray area. More than a third of ESDs collect sales tax. ESDs can also collect fees under the law. Those include ambulance transport fees, false alarm fees, and fire code inspection fees. Because ESDs provide a means of reliable funding for emergency services, other local governments may see their advantages and encourage creations. Many cities will dispatch their fire department to emergencies in the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ. It makes sense. Those areas will eventually become part of the city's tax base, so they should receive protection. Some cities have encouraged creation of ESDs in their ETJs so that the cities can receive some compensation when they respond to those emergencies. Many Texas counties provide financial support for volunteer fire departments that may respond to emergencies in unprotected areas of the county. By creating ESDs, the county's tax burden can be decreased. All ESDs are created by an election conducted by the county government. There are only two uniform election dates in Texas, the first Saturday in May and the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Under current law, counties cannot hold elections on the first Saturday in May in even-numbered years. That's because of possible conflicts with primary runoffs. Anyone who wishes to create a Texas ESD must be aware of certain deadlines. The County Commissioner's Court must call an election 78 days before the uniform election date. For the May election, the deadline is usually in mid-February. For November, the deadline is in mid-August. You can check the Texas Secretary of State's website, www.sos.texas.gov, for the deadlines. As we'll discuss, there are other deadlines for steps in the creation process. You can see those steps here. The creation process begins with a petition. The petition is presented to the Commissioner's Court, which orders the election. After the election is conducted, the Commissioner's Court will canvass the election and, if voters have approved the creation, adopt an order that establishes the new Emergency Services District. The petition process in most areas is not prohibitively difficult. It requires a petition with 100 qualified voters who are property owners in the proposed ESD. We at SafeD encourage petitioners to get about 150 signatures so that if some are disqualified, you don't have to start all over again. The petition describes the name of the district, the boundaries, and collects the printed name, mailing address, voter ID number, signature, and date from the signer. Two of the petitioners have to agree to pay not more than $150 of the county's election costs. We have a sample petition on our SafeD website, but we strongly urge petitioners to consult their own attorney to craft the petition. Once the proper number of signatures are collected, the petition is submitted to the county judge. The county will call a hearing and will have to publish 2 notices, the first at least 21 days before the hearing. This is where it gets tricky. Under the law, municipalities that are located in the proposed ESD or that have extraterritorial jurisdiction in the proposed ESD have the opportunity to opt out. The county will send a written request for action to the municipality, and it has 60 days to act. If it doesn't act in 60 days, residents of the proposed district can petition the city to provide the services that the ESD would have provided. But for that petition to be considered, the law requires signatures from a majority of the voters and more than half the property owners. That's a tough hurdle to clear. Municipal consent can be the most important step in the creation process. If a substantial amount of the property tax base of the proposed district is in a city or its ETJ, the city council's decision to opt out may cripple the proposed ESD's ability to provide services. That may make it unfeasible. Feasibility is the most important finding that the County Commissioners Court will make when it decides whether to call an election. If there's enough tax base to support the proposed district, it can be feasible. The court has to find that the district will benefit territory in the district, secure public safety, and it will aid in conserving the real property or natural resources. All of these are pretty general. Feasibility is the specific. One word of caution. Petitioners would do well to talk with county commissioners well before the process gets started and make sure they understand the need for the new district. Some county commissioners' courts in rural areas of the state take a dim view of any proposal that would increase property taxes and have rejected petitions solely on that basis. If the County Commissioners Court grants the petition, it will order the election. As we discussed, that will need to be at least 78 days before the next uniform election date. It's important that petitioners, again, well in advance of the county calling the election, inform the county election officials of their plans. And that's because depending on how many municipalities and their ETJs are included in the proposed district, the election needs to identify several different areas. There could be several outcomes in each area, and each could affect whether the ESD is created. First, in an ESD election, a majority of the voters in the entire district has to approve the creation. That seems pretty simple, but it gets tricky when you have to determine the votes in each municipality and each ETJ. If the voters in a city approve creation, it's included. But if the voters in a city's ETJ do not approve, then it's out of the new ESD. There could be a crazy quilt of territories in the new ESD. Even if the total vote is in favor of the new district, if a municipality comprises a large portion of the tax base and its citizens don't approve, the new ESD may not be feasible. If that happens, the County Commissioners Court could decide not to approve the election. If the voters approve the ESD and it's feasible, the County Commissioners Court will adopt an order to create the district. This becomes the district's birth certificate. The county will record the various documents associated with creation. Safety encourages the new district to make copies of all these records and file them with other important district records. Once created, the County Commissioners Court in most counties will appoint 5 members of the ESD Board of Commissioners to oversee the new district. This is a little different for multi-county ESDs and for ESDs in Harris, Smith, and Orange County. ESD commissioners in those areas are elected. ESD commissioners must be 18 or older and either a registered voter or a property owner in the district. The law provides some guidelines to County Commissioners Court. For instance, they can take into consideration previous experience with fire prevention or emergency medical services. In ESDs with elected commissioners, the law prohibits commissioners from being too closely affiliated with the service provider that the ESD contracts with. While that only applies to ESDs with elected commissioners, it's a persuasive guideline for other ESDs as well. Public trust depends on transparency, and an arm's length transaction between the ESD board and its fire department or emergency medical organization. Commissioners' courts may also wish to consider these qualifications in its ESD appointees. An ESD needs experience in business operations. If the ESD hopes to build stations, for example, it may need experience in real estate and construction. There's also value to money management experience and information technology. The treasurer at least must be bondable because the law requires the ESD to bond the treasurer at an amount set by the county judge. Even though the Commissioners Court in most counties appoints ESD commissioners, that does not mean the ESD is an arm of the county government. ESDs are separate political subdivisions of the state, just like a school district or a municipality. For the new ESD, safety has a checklist at this link. Of all the items on that checklist, the most important may be selection of an ESD attorney. An attorney experienced with emergency services districts can make life a lot easier for an ESD board by putting the new commissioners off on the right foot. Safety is here to help any new ESD, or an existing ESD for that matter. When questions arise, please feel free to contact us by phone or email. You may find answers to many of your questions on our website, www.safe-d.org. Thank you.